Hello and welcome to Story Mode, episode 21. We made it. I'm always impressed when I get this stream running without it breaking horribly. Hi everybody. How are you doing? If you haven't watched Story Mode before, it's a pretty simple format. It's a book club style podcast where we sit down and we talk about a game that we played over that past month. And this time we're going to be talking about a little game which I streamed most of, called Aporia Beyond the Valley. I streamed up until like about 40 minutes from the end, and then I just kind of stopped and didn't finish streaming it, and then proceeded to beat the game a second time off stream. So that's a thing that I did, because I'm the best streamer. But let me just real quick state, if you haven't seen this show before, it is a full-on spoiler cast. We're going to be talking about everything, our experiences with the game from end to end. So if you are sensitive to spoilers, it's probably best to not watch this show until after you've played the game. That being said, if you don't care or if you just want to hear our thoughts, then feel free to stick around. I'm just going to do real quick introductions here. My co-hosts Lewis and Thyeggman, how you two doing today?
Doing pretty good. It was a fun weekend at PAX last weekend and glad to get back to the podcast.
Cool. And we have a brand new guest host, Mr. Fogg. How you doing today, sir? And what do you do on the internet?
Good evening. My name is Fogg. That's the brilliant introduction from Blind. What do I do on the internet? I tweet, I play video games, and hopefully generally entertain and have a good time. So, and need it be said, thank you very much for having me on today.
And in my personal headcanon, you are the villain from this game.
Let's roll.
It's just you, except maybe like darker colored fog, because you're like kind of like a light gray fog, and this is like kind of a black and red fog.
Yeah. I feel he's given a bad reputation to Fogg. That's all I'm saying.
I don't know, man. Doesn't seem like that bad of a person. He's just misunderstood. So this is an interesting little one to talk about, I think. First time, I think this is the longest game we've ever covered, right?
It took me longer to beat Empathy, I think.
Okay. But that
and
was
if it didn't,
like due to incompetence.
true,
like
but
content.
it still took me longer to beat.
I mean, if you're playing a game that's like unable to function properly, like I'm not surprised. Also, I didn't introduce myself. My name's Greg. Internet calls me Blind. This is my Twitch channel. I stream here a lot. So if you follow the channel, you'll see me on here frequently. And if you're listening to the audio version, I don't know how you found it, but if you're curious to see more about the show, you can follow us at Real Story Mode or find us on SoundCloud. SoundCloud. What? SoundCloud. Anyway, whatever. All of the previous episodes are also up on YouTube. Once again, this is a spoiler cast, and I think without further ado, we should get started. So this game is goddamn beautiful. At least for me, it suffers from some CryEngine problems. I don't know if you guys ran into that, but like physics get weird when you climb a ladder.
Yeah, a little bit.
Little bit.
I don't think it.
All of you at once. Let's go.
Yeah. They did put out an update very recently, which kind of made the ladders a little bit easier. But it's a gorgeous game, and it's awesome. Yeah.
It wasn't so much physics as it was the animation. There was a lot of clipping, and I got the most tearing when I was climbing ladders, which was annoying.
Yeah, but I think expectations for a thing like that are kind of necessary. Number one, like that's just, for all intents and purposes, that's just CryEngine. And that kind of alongside of the fact that it's not actually that expensive a game, and it's a game with a lot of content. Like there's a lot going on in here for a relatively low-priced release. That was a cattail.
I mean, I had quite a few performance issues with the game for reasons that are a bit more complicated. I mean, I have a pretty mid-range computer. Like it has, I think, an i5 and a 970.
Yeah.
So it's not bad, but I had to set the quality settings at 1080p down to medium, and I still wasn't getting a consistent frame rate. It kept jumping between 60 and 30. Like it was really, really inconsistent. And and there was also just kind of weird graphical issues. Like half the time hitboxes were set up wrong, so I could easily clip my head through objects. There was a lot of like little technical things that irked me throughout the game. Not the least of which being any sort of rain or fog just killed the frame rate.
Again, part of me wants to say that that's just CryEngine, but Fog,
That may be CryEngine, but the game uses the engine, and so therefore the engine's problems are the game's problems. I don't think that's invalid to talk about the engine's faults here.
I'm not saying it's invalid. I'm just saying that's just CryEngine. Like CryEngine just kind of does that, unfortunately. Fog, what are your initial like performance and all that sort of stuff?
So yeah, it's
and then we'll get into story.
sure. So it was kind of a similar kind of thing to Lewis, where there were a couple moments where I managed to not really get places that I wasn't meant to, but I was able to kind of clip my head in certain places, thinking, is there going to be something behind here? Is there going to be something hidden away? The only really thing I would kind of pick on as far as the graphics and maybe CryEngine is the graphics when loading into new areas. So when you go through doors, it does kind of take it takes a few seconds just to kind of post process and all that kind of stuff, just for all the textures to come together and make the really good. I'll admit it's one of the more beautiful games that I've got in my collection now.
There are some absolutely glorious set pieces in this game, like especially that ending sequence. It's just so bloody surreal, and I think this game has some of the most interesting interactive cutscenes I've ever seen. Like, it always takes me a little while to decide whether or not we're gonna do a game as a story mode game, because I got this one way before all of you. Full disclosure, I did get a pre-release copy for this game, and the publisher is Green Man Gaming, which is a company that I worked with quite closely. That being said, like, I loaded up that first area, which we haven't mentioned yet, but you kind of wake up in what almost seems kind of like I almost want to call it like a sap coffin. Like it's like this. I always think of it as sap. I don't know why, because it looks like tree sap, but I don't know what it is. It's like
amber, basically, right?
Yeah, kind of.
That's basically the color that it is, anyways.
Yeah, like some Jurassic Park stuff. You you wake up in this coffin, and it releases you for whatever reason. You stand up and you grab this weird tool thing, and you get your glow stick, which is basically what it looks like. And then you walk out of the room into the next room, and you put it into this like piece of machinery, and then this projection shows up, and it's beautiful. And that's how the story is kind of fed to you in these like projection scenes where there's just like almost like a false screen thing, and then it just slowly rotates around you with different scenes, and it's I can't do it justice describing it. It's gorgeous.
Yeah, so we're kind of starting to dive into the premise of the game, and there was something that I went to on Monday morning, shortly after Blind left to go back to Vancouver. I went to this
At PAX
panel.
Yeah.
So I went to this panel, and I wanted to kind of go into this briefly because I'm going to apply a lot of the things that I learned at this to the game. So the panel was about how to analyze video game stories. And so the basic premise of their talk was that there's 4 different kinds of theories that you can apply to games. And that's not to say that these are all the types, but these are the 4 that they outlined. So there's lore theories, which basically recapitulate the story in a theory. And these are often verifiable by a dev or somebody. There's application theories, which are based on a framework in the real world, like, for example, religion, politics, or, for example, feminism, any of the isms that you can think of, basically. And there's a problem that they outlined with application theories, in that they could overreach the true message of the game. So we'll come back to that when we discuss these types of theories in the game. There's also recalcitrant theories, which are based on the player's own experiences, which are also problematic because they're often stated in a way that there's no room to refute the claims that they make, because it's based on only one person's story. And so that person can basically always say their theory is true because it's based on their experiences, right? And the last type of theory that they outlined was the object holism theory, which tries to take the game as a whole and make a informed theory that tries to accommodate the entire game's experiences. And so this tries to account for the entire set of possible experiences that a player can have. And so, for example, in this game, you couldn't really develop an object holism theory until you realize that there are multiple endings that a player can have. There's actually 4 endings, which we'll go into. But we'll dive into these as we continue on the podcast here. And finally, this is kind of a little bit more simple, but there's also the idea that mechanics need to inform the story of the game. Each mechanic should contribute to the story in some way. Otherwise, why is it there? Like it should serve a purpose.
It's a wasted mechanic at that point, right?
Yeah. If it's just a game mechanic for the sake of having a game mechanic, it's like, what's it doing there? We should get the chaff out of the game. So do we want to dive into then? Just dive into the story?
Yeah, we can do that. Anyone want to start?
Should we kind of cover how we approached our first playthrough?
If you want, sure.
Okay, because I don't know how you guys kind of approached the game. I wanted to approach the game from someone who was there but didn't really want to get a lot of the story. I wanted to kind of work my way through the bits I had to. It was pretty rough to play it. I missed a lot of it, which is why I had to go and replay it to fully understand the game, fully understand the premises. But that was kind of how I approached the first playthrough and looked at it as far as mechanics that drove me to the end goal that I saw. There wasn't really too much exploration. That was more my second one, where it was kind of putting the story together. How does that kind of compare to your playthroughs?
I mean, I just played the game and looked for as much as I could in the first playthrough because that's the way I play games. So it was, let's scour this world. Let's try and find all the shards. I didn't find all the shards. Let's like do as much as I possibly can and just see if I can organically beat this game and experience as much as possible in a single playthrough. Second playthrough, I played much faster. I just kind of went from cutscene to cutscene to cutscene to cutscene and just rewatched all of them. So, because the first time I played through it was actually on a review copy, which is separate on my Steam. So, the second time I played through it was just on the actual Steam copy. So, also the review copy had even worse physics. Just thought I'd mention that.
Seems like a theme. We talked about that for empathy. That the heat.
I climbed a ladder and went out of bounds in my review copy of the game. So like I made it like 2/3 of the way up a ladder and it like launched me into space.
It launched you upwards? I had
straight up.
I had an instance where it launched me. I got to the top of the ladder, I think, going into a bit in the first act, and it launched me like I'd done the best long jump, the world Olympic.
Are you referring to like that temple area?
Yeah. Yeah,
okay.
I got to the top.
When I climbed up that the first time, it launched me so far forward, I landed in that lake and skipped a large chunk of the game and had to like reload the first time. But again, that was on the review copy. It didn't happen again on the release copy, so probably not an issue. But like, it was pretty fun.
I had the game crash on me, like flat out freeze up. I couldn't hit the pause button or anything. It just froze.
That's not good.
Fog, I wanted to ask you because you said the first time that you played through, you mostly focused on the mechanical qualities of the game and miss a lot of the story.
Mm-hmm.
So briefly, which mechanics did on your second playthrough, which mechanics were you able to realize played more of a role in the story?
Ooh, blimey. So the first kind of playthrough, I was completely unaware that the 4 sections that you put your the projection symbols on, I didn't really realize they were doors until I had to go beyond. So that was something that I completely missed, and I don't know whether that was through my playstyle or I just didn't click with the symbols quick enough. But that was kind of something that I just completely overlooked and felt I missed. And a lot of the individual kind of puzzle elements, like the one with where you're collecting bits to put on the plaque in the lake, the blue bits, a lot of those puzzles I didn't really visit in the first playthrough. But yeah.
Okay, cool.
I really like the way the acts in this game are split up, because it's very distinct. You have your opening area, which is very locked down and it's extremely linear initially, and it funnels you to the large temple with all the coffins in it. And then the game opens up and it's like almost a mini open area, and you can just kind of go wherever. I'd hesitate to call it an open world. It's more just like a large zone with puzzles in it, and you can just kind of freely move around in this area. And then you move to another area, and then you go back to the first area. So you're on the boat the first time, which takes you to the other temple that's far away. And then you come back to that open area again, and then you go through the point of no return to the far away area where you get to the end of the game. After, well, you solve the far away area, warp back to the temple, and then
Beyond
go
the
into
valley.
game. Yes, you go beyond the valley, essentially.
It's
And
the title of the game.
I think that's really interesting, honestly. I really like that structure. The way it because if it was just a linear puzzle game, I think it would have almost outstayed its welcome. But I really liked that element of exploration. It made the world feel bigger than I think it actually is, because the map is pretty small. You know, you can get across the thing in like a couple minutes, but that kind of freedom to explore and just kind of go from whatever to whatever is a positive for me. You know, I like games like The Witness, I like games like Myst, and that even though this game is much simpler puzzles and mechanics wise, like the puzzles aren't that hard, all things considered, but there's enough to do and enough to explore and enough new things to see that I felt every time I walked around that like little section of map, I'd see something I hadn't seen before. And that is like even Jerome Stout, game developer, friend of the show, one of my moderators, stated that like this game has a really good level design because you're always seeing something new. Every time you turn around, like you see one of those little poles that isn't glowing, you know that you haven't been there yet. And that is kind of impressive considering how small the area is.
Those polls did get me thinking whether they were either for wayfinding or it was a light all of these polls to get an end goal kind of thing.
I think it's a bit of both.
Yeah.
I thought at first it was a checkpoint thing because I didn't light them. Like for a part, I died and I went like all the way back a huge chunk. And I thought maybe if I start lighting these, it'll actually save me more often. And I think that was just confirmation bias, but maybe, I don't know.
That was one of the mechanics that I didn't feel that contributed to the story very much, because they were basically most useful as a way to track where you've been and to light up the night, which you already had a vial that you can just hold out, and it doesn't use any of the vial's energy to just hold it out and light up the way in front of you. So there's not a whole lot to them.
In my instance, I think it did kind of start to drain the vial ever so slightly when you held it out as the illumination mode.
What? Really?
I think.
If that's the case, I didn't notice.
I had a couple ticks down.
If it did, it was really subtle because I looked for it and I couldn't find any actual draining, but I could have sworn it was lower at one point than another, and I don't know.
I could be wrong, but I think that lighting up those little balls in the open area, I think it keeps the cloud away, the darkness thing.
The Reaper cloud.
The Reaper cloud with the red eyes that I'm trying really hard to not just call fog, because that's what I was calling it the entire time. So yeah, I was calling it the evil fog. So
he didn't have sunglasses. He's not
didn't.
stylish.
No, he had a Jim Sterling mask.
That fog is kind of a big story element. Should we kind of go into the main storytelling mechanism of the game, which is those projections we talked about?
Yeah.
I will try and quickly derail this if it's go. Okay,
Yeah.
Just concerning the map. When you guys first came across the map, did you feel like it was going to be bigger with the lower sections with the river? Did you think those are a bit that I need to go to at the same time as dealing with the little valley?
Did I think it would be bigger?
Well, the way that I kind of perceived the map is we had this section where we were with the main altar, all of those kind of areas around the waterfall. And then I thought, how do I get down to that boat so that I go along the river to the lower parts of the map, the swamp and the mirror stuff? I thought that was a part of that act.
I get the feeling that the map is intentionally obfuscated. I've seen other games do stuff like this. Just let's make this map almost a puzzle in and of itself.
Mhm.
Because I found the map like kind of useless for all intents and purposes. It was so abstract and bizarre. I just kind of avoided it.
Yeah.
You know, like
I jumped off a lot of cliffs and went down a lot of waterfalls by accident.
I managed. Okay, that. You remember that temple that I mentioned where we got launched forward? The temple with the puzzle where you need to rotate the spires and get the right symbol
Yeah.
so that you can get the projection. When
Yes.
you come back around and you can look up and you can see that temple, there's a little dock. Okay, there's water there. If you walk into that water, you can like walk all the way to the edge of the temple and then just like walk out of bounds. Like just straight up walk out of bounds.
And make your own adventure.
Go on your own
Yep.
adventure
Yeah.
underneath the map.
I just wanted to kind of see if that was something that was just me, and I think it might have been just me, just in
Well,
the way that I'm playing.
I am notoriously bad at being able to have a sense of direction. If I don't really know the immediate area of something, I can get lost just by turning right. Like I am really bad at this sort of thing. And I found the map more confusing than it really should have been. And I was thinking that I remember when Firewatch, we talked about that. I brought up that a lot of people said that they didn't like that it had the player position indicator on the map, that they said, there's an option to turn off. You should turn it off, that you should play that. And I said, I like being able to have it on as someone who has trouble navigating. Having the option to have the map just say, you are here, helped a lot. And I think this game needed that option, just to be able to say you are here. Or at the very least, when you pick up the map, it has a little dot that says, hey, this is where you picked up the map. And then I could at least mentally track where I'm going by keep pulling out the map.
So then, Lewis, would you say that having the map made it a better experience, or would having no map at all have been a better experience for you?
I don't think not having the map would have made it better, but just the way the map was made it frustrating.
Okay, that makes sense.
I will admit, sorry, again, the second playthrough, I managed to get past the map. So the first piece of the map is on the higher level. I managed to get past that by going on the lower level, completely missing the map on purpose this time, and managed to get stuck past one of the linear buffers where you couldn't go back. So if someone managed to do that and then find a second piece, I'm unsure whether it would kind of just give you half the map or maybe a full map, expecting you to have grabbed all of it. That's maybe something to test, but
based on the graphics, I would assume it would give you the full map because you pick up what looks like a full map when you get that second part.
I noticed that too.
I wonder if that was intentional. Anyways, go on, Eggman.
possibly.
Shoot.
Yeah, so we mentioned this briefly already, but there's these projection devices that you put in your vial, and it basically gives you what is this game's version of a cutscene. And it's a very, we'll call it low frame rate, but it's more like frame by frame of the story of the game.
I'd call it more like shutter framing. Like here's an image, here's an image, here's an image. Like low frame rate makes it sound like it's ugly. These cutscenes are gorgeous.
There's an aesthetic to it that I had a hard time pinning down. Like originally I was thinking it was kind of Egyptian looking, and some of the characters sort of hinted at that style. But I'd say now it was hinting more at stained glass window style, which is a motif in the game.
Yeah.
I did feel that the frame rate might have been something a little bit like a zoetrope, which was one of those old kind of canisters which you would spin around and create
right,
from still images. That's the impression I got from.
Oh, because then so that the vial could be like an analog for that cylinder.
Potentially, yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. Anyways, so for example, the first video projection that you do, it's required. You can't get out of the main room. Actually, you might be able to get out of the main room without doing it, but so it shows a projection, and you're introduced to one of the, we'll call them three main characters of the game, which is Birdman. and he's basically wearing one of those, if you played Assassin's Creed, the long like bird beak masks, but he's a human, and he's making the vial, the same vial that you carry around in the game, with the apparatus in the room that you're in, and he finds out that people seem confused as to what the vials can do, and that's basically all you get in the first projection. And the second one, we kind of get the other main elements of the story, the exposition, that is, that there's this crying woman and the Birdman sending a body into the river on a boat. And the Birdman then departs, and he uses the vial that he created to grow a sort of flower. And he ends up cooking the flower and making a soup out of it. And he gives it to the sun lady. The images of the sun, so we'll call her the sun lady.
The sun god?
And she...
Sun soup for the sun god. Moving on.
Can I interrupt for just a moment, because there are 7 characters that appear to have some sort of higher role within the society, and they're all distinguished by a symbol that they wear around their neck. And there's 7 of them in total. The guy that we're talking about with the bird mask has a skull. I believe you play as the lady with the sun symbol, and there's one that's like a compass. There's a fish. There's a couple other ones.
They're all actually mentioned in the achievements, so that there's the face, the hourglass, the wheel, the leaf, the hammer, the sun, and then the sign of the hunter, which is the red hooded guy. It looks kind of like a tie.
It's I think a fish, because when you do the projections, it's supposed to look like a fish, but because
it's called in the achievements the sign of the hunter. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, because I think it's supposed to be like hunting fish
I
or
see.
something.
I see what you're saying. An image of a fish. We can call it the fish because the sign of the hunter is really long.
Yeah.
There is lore we can come to chronologically in the game that kind of relates to that, but go on.
So I was talking about the sun lady, and she gives the Birdman, Skullman, gives the broth to this lady who works in a hospital, basically, and she gives it to her patients who are miraculously healed. Like, they're laying down, this guy like gets up from his bed, he has a cane, he's like, I don't need this cane, I'm fine now, and everybody's healed. It's miraculous.
The way I interpreted it is essentially this, like, I thought of it as tea rather than soup, but we'll call it soup for the ease's sake. Essentially, they discovered the Fountain of Youth, is what it looks like some sort of like either all healing or anti-aging potion, I guess.
That's a good example of an application theory, because we're applying a real life story to the lore of the game.
Yeah.
I don't think that the Fountain of Youth is usually associated with an actual...
a pirate is all right with me.
a pirate or whatever, but basically we find out through the course of this story that this flower has magical properties, and they have some very sinister symptoms.
I mean, very early on mechanically in the game, the flowers actually play a role. There are these little pots around, and if you hold your light up, it causes a little plant to grow, and it's one of these flowers, and then if you eat it, it'll heal you. So they do exist mechanically within the world, as alongside of just in these cutscenes. So
yeah,
I wanted to ask, so my interpretation of the flowers was that they healed the people that ate them or ate the soup that they made out of them in the immediate sense, but then later it would cause them to die, basically. I don't know if that... What were your guys' opinions on that? Because we see people in certain projections eating the flowers and then almost immediately dying.
I'm a little bit confused, because a lot of the story is told kind of out of order, and I've had a little bit of time piecing it together. There are some deaths that seem to be somewhat correlated to the plant, though the plant was shown healing, and then there's the one boy who was sick, and he tried to give him the plant, and he ended up dying anyways. And then there's the black fog ghost dude, which has its own thing of death, and I just eventually got confused.
My kind of interpretation was kind of piecing together how they almost started to cultivate and farm the actual plant. So they went to a full scale to say, we're going to make a harvest of this so that we can continue to use it.
Yeah.
And I'm almost wondering whether that's something to do with, let's say, the soil in the valley is something this is kind of my singular expectation of it, where maybe it cultivates the ability for the purpose from this flower. And maybe that starts to wear off and then causes these negative impacts when they start to move it.
The way
Over
I
top.
sorry,
Go
the way I interpreted those random deaths is once they've taken it too much, they become the thing. It's just like a matter of time thing. That's the way I interpreted it. Or if they stop, then they then die and then become the thing.
The thing. What do you mean the thing?
The fog stuff. And then they.
Oh, you're saying that they basically their spirits contribute to this ominous fog.
The way I interpreted that the fog is souls being trapped in this realm or the realm of the world versus going to whatever that white area is at the end. Heaven, hell, purgatory, call it what you want. Whatever that other thing is I essentially see that as trapping them there. So it's like once you've taken this plant, great, you're going to be healthy, but you can't ever leave now. That's just the way I interpreted it.
I kind of came to a different conclusion, but my conclusion has more to do with what happens at the very end of the game.
Yeah.
So you'd mentioned that kind of purgatory area, and it tells in a very important part of the story. Because, while I mentioned there's the 7 different characters with the symbols and stuff, there's 3 that become really important.
Yeah.
Because there's the guy with the skull, there's you with the sun, and then there's the hunter with the fish.
Also,
And there's sort of this hint that the guy with the skull is creating all of these things partially by the help from the guy with the fish. So like, the fish guy had given him the orb, and so the skull guy created the vials, and then the skull guy had also discovered the plant and all the other stuff. And then there's the whole thing where the kid dies and they apparently blame the guy with the skull, and so he gets imprisoned in the basement. And then the fish guy comes and like beats him up and accidentally kills him. There's that whole sequence that they go through.
Also, this is not a Hotline Miami fan fiction. I swear.
Just to be clear.
Just to be clear. Go on.
Because, he gets imprisoned or whatever. The fish guy kind of comes and beats him up and he dies. Of course, the son sees him and brings his body out. And that's when you first see the fog ghost figure. I think in the timeline. I think that's how the timeline is supposed to be, that's the first time that character appears, which suggested to me that character was more of an unfinished business type situation, that he was wronged by that hunter.
The Skull Man?
Yeah.
The Skullman was wronged by the hunter, and so he was taking vengeance in his afterlife, and that vengeance happened to include creating this massive wave of death.
So I kind of felt that as well, where it was he was that kind of unfinished spirit existence that needed to be kind of vanquished from completion. But the impression that I got from the lore as far as Hunter and Faceman, let's call them, Birdman, was that I almost got the impression when Faceman started to kind of say no, never mind with the flowers that might lead to bad things, and then the kid actually dies because of it. I almost think that Hunter thought it was malicious from Faceman, and that it was Faceman trying to compromise what good was coming from that, and that kind of led him to be imprisoned based on the expectation he was doing it with malicious intent when it wasn't actually, he wasn't actually doing anything of particular.
So you're saying that he wasn't aware what the effects of this creation would have, and so he was trying to then recant and say this is bad, but
yeah,
decided to imprison him anyways.
Yeah.
And then either that's or kind of an essence of the hunter thought Thyeggman was trying to say, okay, I'm going to poison people with this now. And that might have been the hunter's perception of what was happening that was possibly misguided or incorrect.
Okay, I'll go through my interpretation of basically the full story. I think this is my application theory about it, because I think it's a good folly of man story, in that the Birdman makes this potion, it's great, but then they decide to cultivate this flower and make a bunch of it. They're able to advance their society, but at the cost of this strange side effect which causes people to die. Birdman eventually becomes basically a servant of his own creation, and he sends people off on the river with the help of a couple of assistants. And then he is also helping them to encase them in these sap, we'll call them coffins. And then he tries to get Red Hood, the main leader of the Sign of the Hunter faction, to stop using this, but the Red Hunter is like the leader of the society, and he's like, no, we're doing so well, and so he imprisons them and eventually kills him in rage after Birdman won't continue to make this deadly substance, basically.
The way I didn't interpret them as factions. I might be wrong here. I kind of thought of them as like different seats in a government.
Yeah, I thought of it as like Council of Elders sort of thing, that there's effectively the sixth that control, but the guy who controls death is sort of a hidden seventh figure.
Or maybe rather than like a council of elders, like a council of priests or something.
Yeah.
You'll see often in the imagery that there are only 6 of the symbols, and it's missing the skull in, like, for example, the table at the beginning of the game, or the altar with the flames down in the middle of the valley. There's no face symbol.
Also, I should mention, as you complete different areas of the game, there is kind of a central area where the entire room is just full of these coffins, which all have bodies in them. And as you complete different areas, you get like little chunks of a puzzle, and that is filled in on a table. And each puzzle piece creates one of these symbols. And as you create these symbols, it gives you like kind of a part of that symbol, which you can then hold up in front of you and use it to open doors. It's kind of hard to explain verbally, but trust me, it makes sense.
Yeah.
And then those doors are then used as fast travel points.
I'd probably say it's a little bit like a perspective puzzle, kind of in the way of The Witness, where you need to kind of line it up with something in the environment and then
Witness, Hellblade.
Yeah.
Kind of like The Witness, except entirely not, because it's way more narrow than how it's used in The Witness.
Yeah. No spoilers for The Witness for people who haven't played The Witness, but yeah. You should play The Witness.
It's line puzzles. Spoilers, sorry.
It's a pretty good game though. It's pretty good line puzzles.
It really is.
Those are really good line puzzles. Anyways,
one thing I wanted to kind of correct, that you had mentioned the boats with the death. What I understood was kind of their culture was when someone died, they would set him off, they'd set him in a boat and they'd float him downriver. And so then what would happen is that the skull guy was at the end of the river. He'd see the boats come and he'd bring them in, take out the dead bodies and put them in a coffin. So the idea is that the society would send off their dead in the boat, and it was the skull guy's responsibility to deal with it at the end of the river.
We also see him though, like I mentioned, I think it was the very first video projection, that he's standing with another woman and sending off a dead body. So that's one possible explanation. I'm just saying that it's not that he always did that. It may be that after he created this miracle soup, that he decided that he would try to save these people by capturing them as they floated down the river, basically.
Are we all cool to call it Miracle Soup, because that's a really good name?
I mean, I was just calling it tea, but Miracle Soup works.
Yeah.
I was kind of calling it like
tea.
It's like, because when you look at when you grow it, it has this kind of long stalk, but it looked like the ends were mushrooms to me. These kind of dark colored mushrooms.
Oh,
So I was
like a
calling it mushroom
toadstool?
plant.
Like a red and white toadstool, basically.
Yeah.
I can see that. So-
When I was first playing the game, kind of my first time through, I was thinking it was an analogy for the Black Plague, in part because that black shadowy figure that you saw had that kind of pointed nose and the hood, which was common for the doctors during the Black Plague, because there's a whole story about how they thought that diseases were spread through odor, so they'd have the long noses with a lot of scents in it to try to stop the spread of the disease, which clearly didn't really work. But that head shape made me think that maybe they're trying to draw a correlation with the Black Death, which would also explain the Black Fog. But when I played it a second time, I felt like that link was too vague. But now thinking about it, I feel like that link is stronger if you take into account that plant. That like it was almost a analogy for penicillin, that you create this discovery of something that seems to have miraculous health benefits. And so, it's saving a lot of lives and they're using it more and more, but eventually, diseases grow strengths against it. And so people are now starting to die again, and it created these super diseases.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
I don't know if this means anything, but the developer for this game is from Denmark. So if they were like, I don't know.
Yeah, that is, I mean,
Yeah.
the plague. I was gonna say most of our theories encompassed pretty much everything throughout the valley part of the playthrough.
Yeah.
And there's a point in the game where it tells you go through a certain door and it says you're about to go beyond the valley. You cannot return after this point.
Which
And
is not true. You do. You just can't go back to the open area.
Which I feel like is a missed opportunity, but okay.
What?
anyways, so you go past this area and then you get this other backstory that you may have been able to guess at before this, but it's kind of confirmed for you in this area, which is that there's this wraith figure who comes and attacks you. We should talk about him though before we dive.
Before we get to the Beyond the Valley portion, I just want to mention the lake and the town, because we did describe like this thing taking over. As people start dying, like there's this stuff that kind of seeps out of them almost in the imagery. And I feel like that almost contaminated the town that they were all living in, because there's a point where you go to their original living space, right? And this is before you go beyond the point of no return. You get into a boat, and one of the most atmospheric moments I think I've ever seen in a video game, actually, like hands down my favorite section of this game. This wide open, beautiful lake with this foggy town off in the distance. It's like something out of Silent Hill. The thing is, it's hauntingly gorgeous. Although it's amazing how fast that boat moves, considering you're supposed to be only paddling it with one tiny little paddle. But that's you basically have like a jet engine on the back of this boat. You're like, zoom! But it is.
I screwed up that part and had to swim across the entire lake.
Oh.
But seriously, that sequence is gorgeous if you play it as intended, and it's haunting. It's interesting. There's a cutscene around there that basically just shows them all leaving the town and then building tree houses because it's above the mist.
Yeah. Well, that one, there was also a part that seemed really confusing, because it seems like they're evacuating, they're trying to leave, and then that fish guy comes and basically forces them to go back. And that's when they build the tree houses to try to go above that black fog.
Yeah. Which is just really neat. I like that whole section is like, whoa, okay, this game is something special.
And those tree houses is like one of the first things you explore. Like you do that just before you actually get to the valley.
Yeah, no, it's one of the opening areas is the tree houses, which is kind of cool because you can actually replaying the game, looking from the tree houses, you can actually see like later sections of the game. Like you can see the whole open area from those tree houses, which is really neat. I love it when games do that, when you can be in one portion of the game and look somewhere and see something and be like, that is also part of the game. That is really cool, and I like that.
And I think chat would like to recall its mist just for confusion.
Okay, let's call it Mist. Sorry.
Sorry about my name. Or
I still
frog.
think it's a
Frog
fog,
works.
but whatever.
Yeah, frog works.
We'll call it a mist just to prevent confusion.
I mean, we could just call it Jim Sterling. That was my other headcanon name while I was playing through it.
So, the Jim Sterling that Blind is talking about is, it ends up, so this is something that surprised Lewis and I know at least, because neither of us were aware that this is actually a horror game. It's not marked
It's
as
not
horror.
a horror game. It's spooky.
It's marked as a horror game on their webpage.
Bullshit. That game is not horror.
It says it's a first-person adventure/horror game as in abandoned valley. Blah blah blah. So
Bullshit.
it doesn't say that on Steam, but it's basic. Like the character is basically Slenderman with different mechanics. Like
no, it's not.
but it is like so you're looking
Oh
around
my
and you see like
God.
this red dot in the distance, and it's like, wait, what's that? And then like you hear the whole screen goes black and white, and you like the music gets really fast, and you're like, it's happening, and then you see it come towards you, and you start running away. If you sit and look at it, it's the Birdman, but he just comes towards you and looks you in the face with this horrific visage, and it's very like, it put me on edge, which I think
It's
actually
good.
enhanced
Okay.
the game for me.
Can I just say this about that? Because the first time I encountered him, I was still in the valley.
Okay.
Can-
Before you say this, both Eggman or all three of you guys at different intervals sent me more or less the exact same message saying, "Why did you make me play a horror game?" Okay, continue.
But
God.
But the thing is, the game is very misleading about it. It's like the first time I encountered it, I was still in the valley. And what I was doing was trying to solve those optional puzzles. So there's a whole side mission about getting fragments of a glass door or whatever, right? And so there's just a whole bunch of puzzles. So I was in a puzzle mood. I was looking around. I was trying to discover stuff. And then all of a sudden, I see a figure, about 10 yards away. And I'm like, oh, I wonder what that is. So I walk towards it.
I think you're
I
supposed
walk
to.
right up to the thing. It goes, rock. And this is half my health. And I was like, what exactly happened? And after about 5 minutes of reeling, I had realized that it was supposed to be this horror element. And so the game was switching between this puzzle aspect where you're supposed to be very inquisitive and trying to solve and figure out stuff to a horror element where you're supposed to not ask questions and just run. And there was no real warning that there was ever going to be that transition.
true.
And that
Okay. You do actually you're forced to see it very early on. That there's right before the kind of temple area above the lake, before you get into the open valley, there is an area that has a story bit, and it's kind of right when the sun goes down, right after the tree houses, and you put your glow stick into the altar, and then the whole area lights up. Right before those ladders those branches that like to shoot you really far. Man,
yeah.
This is really funny. But no, right when you have to kind of go down into that dark temple area behind it, number one, you see it. It's in there. It's there, and then it goes poof.
Nope.
It was there for me.
Yeah.
And two,
So your point that it's
there's
unmissable is untrue.
well, there's fog, there's mist everywhere in that area, and the music plays. If you wait in that area long enough, it will show up and bop you.
How is somebody who's never played the game before supposed to know that music indicates there's this?
There's spooky
Horror
music
beat.
playing.
And exactly as you said, the first time you see it, it just goes poof, which indicates that it is not a threat.
No, it indicates that it's a thing that exists in the world that you
Yes.
probably should avoid because there's spooky music playing.
All it establishes is that it's a thing in the world. It never establishes that it's a negative thing in the world.
Mm.
And
Also,
well-
when you're in the open
And the
area,
next time I saw it, I was 3 more hours into the game.
in the open area, when you're wandering around, if you look up, there is a cloud that kind of moves around in the area. That's where he is. So if you walk into that, it is probably possible to play the entire game and completely miss dying. to this
If
thing.
you know that. The game never says,
I
oh, hey,
think
there's
that
a
you're
cloud
supposed
floating
to
around.
encounter it. by mistake, because I encountered it by mistake too. I was just kind of walking. I think someone in chat remembers this. I was just kind of walking. I was like, yada, 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 yada. What's going on? And then suddenly, like, everything goes black and white. And unlike you guys saw it first, I think. I was just walking. Thing in my face, dead.
So
And so
I
was
would
just
like to weigh in on this, gents.
Go ahead.
I
do this
think. Oh yeah, it's got to be interesting. I don't know whether I was the first one to go blind. Why are you getting me playing a spoopy game?
You were the first one.
Awesome. So just what you were saying about him showing up in the section, I think I had that flawless. I kind of clued in and thought, okay, so he's the bad guy. I don't want to know him. Him with his Terminator-esque eye, he can stay as far away from me as possible. So, I encountered him on the stairs in the lower part, and then I thought, okay, cool. I then went out and thought, okay, maybe he's only local to that area, or maybe he's only local to that area at night. So I then kind of proceeded, normal playthrough, got to the altar in the actual valley part. I then went off and just kind of did other things. I left the game running, obviously with pause mode engaged. Went to order some pizza, just other things. Came back to the game, loaded up my map, did a little bit of wandering, loaded my map, and then got jump scared by him. He just was like, yo, I'm everywhere, dude. I'm going to get you. And I think that was about the time I sent the message over to Blind. It's like, dude, why? But I did have another instance with him. So in continuing the first playthrough, I was trying to get to one of the places that I felt I needed to go. This time, I didn't see the cloud, but the music started to go. I thought, here we go. So I managed to climb a ladder and evade him. I looked him dead in the eye, but he couldn't actually pathfind to me, which meant he just teleported away and went and did other things for the time being that I was up on the ladder. So that was kind of me getting over the initial fear of thinking, okay, he can be anywhere, he can do whatever he wants, but he can't climb ladders. So
he is stuck to the ground.
Yeah.
Which is why they built tree houses.
Exactly, yeah. That kind of clicked with me. But yeah.
I don't know. Maybe I just have a thicker skin than all of you guys, but to me, this game really isn't horror. It's creepy, but there's a difference between eerie atmosphere and horror. I definitely wouldn't compare it to Slenderman. Slenderman has silence, extremely loud, borderline ear-rapey jump shock, and then thing in your face, It's no Five Nights at Freddy's. There's no bullshit jump scares. Everything is like you can see everything coming if you're not looking in the right direction and he comes up behind you, maybe. But if you're aware of your surroundings, you can completely avoid it. It's
okay.
I think it might have been our perception.
Yeah,
that's basically what I'm trying to say. Like, I agree to a certain extent. Once I had that first jump scare and I knew it was there, the game wasn't really scary. It just had a dark and boding atmosphere, and the existence of that character helped to establish that. But, and this is the big part, they did not establish it clearly enough in the beginning, which made the initial jump scare out of the blue. And that was the part that I can't accept. That if they wanted it to be horror, fine. They just needed to do a better job of establishing that they had that horror element in it.
I don't think I agree with that, though, either, because that could be part of the entire design of their game, is that you're like walking through this world and you're like seeing all these images and shows, and it's like, oh, it's whatever. And then all of a sudden you get this and it's like, man, this is a very different game. And then they want you to try to shift your mindset. And I think that's perfectly acceptable. And I made an effort to do that when I was playing, although I kind of was spoiled a little bit by your reaction in our chat, but it still made me rethink it, because I was very kind of relaxed up until that point.
Yeah.
I mean, it may be a part of the original design, but that doesn't mean that the original design was not flawed. Just because it was intended doesn't mean it was good.
The weird thing is, I've had an experience like with this Birdman figure in another game, The Vanishing of Ethan Carter, which is a similar, really pretty game, exploration, puzzles. There was one certain puzzle further into the bit where it kind of established a maze. And the first time I kind of got into that maze, it was the first kind of moment that I encountered another presence, let's call it. And that was actually a jump scare. It sent you back to the start of the maze. And then I was just like, well, I wasn't expecting that. And obviously that was completely one-off. It wasn't as much of a key factor as it is in Aporia, but it kind of threw me through the loop. And I thought I was playing Vanishing of Ethan Carter kind of game where I'm the only existence with the skeletons, let's call it. But the introduction of it really did change how I started to play the game. So maybe that's what they were trying to do.
I think that I think that the existence of the malevolent creature, because we should move on to the rest of the story and finish that bit of the discussion, but I think the existence of the malevolent creature, for me, at the very least, yeah, it's kind of startling the first time he gets you, if he gets you. I think it keeps you from just kind of running in a straight line to see things, because it immediately makes you go, oh god, what's there? And it actually, to me, made me find things I probably wouldn't have found as easily, because I was constantly spinning around and looking. Because if it was just an open area with a couple puzzles in it, I feel like it would be very tempting to just kind of hold down W until you ran into something, versus actually having an obstacle moving around forces you to run in a different direction, and that could end with you finding other things. As well as
one thing I noticed is that I think you run
tension.
faster than him.
Oh yeah, way faster, way faster.
So again, once you know that he's there and what he does, then it's just a matter of, it's not really that difficult. But my complaint was that they didn't do a good enough job of establishing what he was capable of doing.
Fair.
And then you get to the swamp area. Can we talk about the swamp
area?
area?
Faster than him.
Now, I know that you don't want to compare it to Slender, but the aspect of being in a confined location with things that you need to, let's say, collect and kind of compromise your own safety doing so, that did kind of have aspects where I'm like, I don't want to be in this environment, but I kind of need to be at the moment. Is that fair?
Okay. Here, I'll explain why I don't like comparing it to Slender. Actually, it's funny now that I think about it. It is funny that you're comparing it to Slender, because there's another game called Valley, which is kind of similar to this in a lot of ways, minus the horror element. Plus, you're also like mech-powered Tree Sonic, but that's
similar.
Exact same game, except there's mech-powered Tree Sonics. And
no, like visually, it's very similar. It's also excruciatingly beautiful and like very interesting.
We're talking about another game, yes.
Different game. But it's by the studio that made Slender. But the reason I don't like to compare it to Slender is because Slender is terrible. It's fucking awful. Okay. And I genuinely think mechanically, fairness and description-wise, this game is far superior to that. So if you want to compare it to horror games or something like that, that's fair.
Yes, but Slender is also a 15-minute experience compared to the 7-some-odd-hour experience of Aporia.
Yeah.
So also, just because Fogg is comparing it to Slender does not mean he's saying that Aporia is a bad game, which is what you're construing. He can compare it to Slender without giving it the same connotation
but
as
it's
Slender.
not even mechanically similar, really. Yes, there is.
I would say that moment actually draws a lot of the same mechanics from Slender. There's a figure that is stalking you around. There's things you're trying to collect, and the more you collect, the more in danger you become. There's, clear end goal. There's definitely an influence. Whether or not it's a direct influence or not is debatable, but there's definitely an influence there.
I vastly disagree, having played both games, but we'll agree to disagree on that one.
Well, I'm talking about the original Slender, for the record, not the remake.
I'm talking about Slender: The Arrival.
I'm talking about the original Slender.
The original Slender is a fucking freebie shit game.
Yeah.
No, I'm talking about the actual game.
Okay, yeah, I think I'm talking about the Flash game where you're collecting notes and then you get the
I mean,
jump scare. And
the full game is just that fleshed out. But anyways, whatever.
Okay, yep.
So swamp area.
You were talking about the swamp.
Yeah. It was introduced incredibly with the very kind of drawn out lake section to say you're going beyond the valley, just get ready for whatever is here. Then initially I didn't realize he was there. I kind of got clued in by one of the loading images to say blue looks nice and I'm seeing flowers. Maybe I'll see that later in the game. And then I noticed him moving around the area thinking, okay, how am I going to get past this? And I managed to click in. I needed 4 of the 5 things that were in that area, the little bubbles, let's call them. So the gameplay
The blue
looked...
torches, I think they were.
Torches? Okay, sorry, yeah. But they kind of offered like an aura of protection. And the way that I managed to get around that situation was I managed to collect 3 of them really well. The 3 at the top, then the 2 at the bottom were really difficult. So I ended up doing a smash and grab on one of the ones on the bottom, going back to the catwalk where the boat was, and then doing the 3 that I knew I could do, and then rushing to the end. And that was kind of how I got around that section. Is that kind of a similar thing with you guys, or how did you guys approach it?
For me, I thought it was kind of interesting because the first time I did it, it ended up being really trivial for me. Like I only got close to getting caught once because I noticed the color change, but I never saw it, and I was really close to a safe zone at that point. Anyways, second playthrough of the game, entirely different story. I actually saw him like 3 separate times trying to get 2 of the torches, and he attacked me like twice in a row while trying to get the 3rd one, and it was just.
I played that area like Metal Gear Solid.
I played that area like, okay, ready, grab it, run.
As long as you're on the boardwalk, you can outrun him. He can like cut across, but like you can like walk towards him, see him coming towards you, and then double back and just walk. As long as you stay on the boardwalk, he can't catch you. As long as you're moving.
You had mentioned earlier that you can outrun him. It's not true in the swamp because you're slower in the mud, which I think is a great, because otherwise he's once you figure out that you can outrun him, it's a very trivial like encounter.
It's a tension mechanic.
Yeah.
But
we can also jump in the mud, which gets you a little bit faster, but
I can see that you're expressing frustration for that area, I think, Lewis, because
a little bit, but again, I never got caught in that area, so it was weird and more difficult than I probably would have liked, but it didn't kill the game or anything because again, I got through it.
That is one of my favorite sections of the game. The lake, the town. I think that area, I think it has flaws. I think
my favorite area is the one after that.
I think this entire game has flaws, but that town I think is just bloody gorgeous and I love it. I just, from the lake to the town, the atmosphere of that area, like I've said before, I can be sold on a game just on atmosphere. And it was like a peppering of Silent Hill with just like this weird thing and then just collecting these orbs, and it all just looks so beautiful. I don't know. I love that area.
But well, for me, I'm a sucker for good puzzles, so I really like the area after that.
Probably the best puzzles.
The light beams.
Yeah.
The best puzzles in the
really
game
good.
For me were the light beams and the water thing.
The water buckets.
The redirecting water, or
the redirecting water, into the big pond in the middle. Yeah, I loved that puzzle. The scale of that puzzle was really cool.
Yeah.
The weird thing about that one, because I just want to mention real quick about that water puzzle, is I was trying to look around, trying to figure it out, and I found a wall on the side that gave you at least 2/3 of the puzzle.
Yeah,
like it gives you the answer.
There were a lot of things around that you could see the layout of that. I didn't look at them closely enough, but I tried to figure it out myself, and it was fun.
Yeah, I like
my
that puzzle a lot.
My first thought was that I needed to come back when it was raining, because when it was raining in certain parts of the day, you would come. I thought, I need a lot of water. How about when it rains? And it only really took me for like the second play session of the first playthrough to say, I haven't been up that giant, giant area and wondered what's up there. And there you go.
What do you think about releasing the water dams, though?
That was really cool. I
Yeah.
did kind of, I was in a habit of running during the game, and I managed to run back across the bridge when it broke, and I managed to fall to my death. So there were a lot of moments where I thought, I must be really not doing things right if I'm kind of dying, if I'm going back and getting teleported to checkpoints that they're like, how did you die? Like, we have a checkpoint, but how did you die? So I almost felt like I was playing somewhat against the grain the first time, and the knowledge just kind of was there for the second playthrough, and I did everything right.
All right, so I think we should try and move forward here instead of backwards. I'm sorry for kind of derailing us.
Yeah, no worries.
But,
I'm sorry for bringing us back to that one.
Yeah, it's fine. So beyond the, once you go to beyond the valley, and you're there's a set of puzzles which I think we all mentioned were probably the best puzzles in the game. It's essentially it's pretty standard stuff actually. It's there's a beam of light, you get a mirror, and you have to angle the mirrors to shine the light into gems, which either open doors, move platforms, and do various things to the environment. And again, it's another very large scale puzzle because the entire thing is interconnected all the way through from end to end. And it's, I really like that area. Not a huge amount of story in that area, but I really like that area.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that was a weakness of the area. I didn't really find a lot of story there either, but it
Yeah.
was a very well designed puzzle.
I
I was trying to think of like, what would an old society like this use this for? And some of the tapestries in that area showed them in fields of crops that were not the miracle flower. So I thought that was kind of interesting too.
Yeah.
So this could
And
have
like
been like a greenhouse for the
Yes,
other plants.
That's what I was gonna say.
Yeah, and the a lot of the fences have the leaf symbol, which is one of the 6,
And if you
which is one of the ones you can get the projection for, but I think it's actually missable. My second playthrough, I never got the projector for the leaf symbol. I'm not sure where I missed it.
Interesting. Even if like you look down at the not down. If you just look around, there's like planters and stuff everywhere. So either it's a massive grow operation or they're just they're growing crops of some sort. So although that being said, there are, I don't know if this is mechanical or story wise, but there are pots that give you the flower that heals you. So that might just be there for story, just for mechanical purposes rather than story purposes. But I guess that to an extent you can take that they were growing some form of that plant there.
I think that the stories play very well into both the flowers play very well into both the story and the mechanics because they're usable in the game and they do something material, and then they're one of the main objects in the story. So I think it's fine that they play some other place because this society was shown to have been kind of addicted to it, right?
Yeah. So let's move forward, shall we?
Right. Yeah.
When you go back to the temple for the last time, once you have all of the symbols, one for each of the elders, the very end of that plant, the greenhouse sequence with the light mirrors, if there's nothing else that you guys want to say about that area?
Well, you don't actually get the last one from that sequence. You have one more you have to get inside the temple.
Okay, so you get the second to last one, and then you go back to the temple for the last time, which is why I say you don't actually leave for good. You do get to go back, but you just don't. Because I tried to go back into the open area when I went back to the temple.
Yeah.
I tried to go back in that open area. The door's closed. You can't get through. So then you get the skull overlay, and you go to the side of the temple, and there's a little door with this part of the skull on it, and you fill in the image, and you go through, and then you go on some crazy ass mushroom trip.
I will admit, when I first kind of came across that, and there's a certain part of that where you see the Birdman, and I saw him in the distance, looked left and right, and thought, this better not be a maze, and I need to evade him. And I ended up going the opposite direction and just other ways to what I saw. He saw which way he went, and thankfully it wasn't a maze. It was.
It's not. It's the loop.
That and he can't hurt you. You walk up to him and he just goes. Boop.
Yeah.
He vanishes.
He won't pursue you in there, which I thought was very interesting.
Yeah. Like he had kind of led you to, or got to the point where you'll be able to understand, and he's kind of passived up because of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so eventually you reach a room with 2 altars, one with the skeleton of the Birdman because he still has his mask on, and then one with an empty altar with the sun logo on it.
Yeah.
And this
And
was
the one with the bird guy has the skull symbol on it on the front.
yeah, and this was I didn't realize that you were the sun lady until
Yeah.
this point.
Neither did I.
This is the point that I
Yeah.
realized it. I was like,
I
oh, wow.
realized it because they established the 6 symbols, 6 of the 7 very early, because you wake up out of what we're calling the kind of the amber pots, and you look behind you and it's the symbol of the lady with the sun. It's like, oh, I guess that's me because that's the bed I woke out of. And you see the other 5 with the different amber beds there as well.
That was second playthrough for me because obviously I was playing the first one horrifically, let's call it. But I kind of went through the idea of who you were, but then questioned whether you were actually a person or another spirit, and like a counter of the Birdman. But go on, by all means, continue.
So you lay down on this altar, and then you have kind of a spiritual link with the Birdman, and you live through kind of the memories of him and another girl in this dream world. Like it starts off pure white, and then you just kind of walk, and there's these pictures. It starts off with a picture of 2 children. The children are playing, and then they are growing up. They're reading some scrolls, and eventually you see that these children are actually the Sun Lady and the Birdman, because the Sun Lady dons her dress with the sun on it, and the Birdman is given his mask and his robe with the skull on it. And then the whole world turns black, and then you keep walking. And after that, you get some more images that are kind of repeats of what you've seen in the other parts of the game. The council and the Birdman trying to dissuade the council from using the flower anymore, and the lady healing the sick and things like that. And then you get the last, is it the last? I think it's the last video projection where the red hooded man imprisons the Birdman, and he wants, it looks like he wants him to make more of the miracle soup. And the Birdman refuses. Red hooded man kills him.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then beyond that, you kind of wake up, stand up, and then you
get the last piece.
Yeah, the Birdman's corpse next to you falls over, and I was like, oh god, it's gonna stand up, and it didn't, and I was really happy. That was the scariest moment of the game, by the way, at least for me.
Says you.
Zombies. No.
But, the main thing to note is through the game they've kind of been establishing the spirits as, well, the nice spirits or the good spirits as like white dots and entities, and then through that process of you getting the piece, it then kind of establishes one new nice spirit, and I think that is almost the level of closure for the Birdman.
I think what you did was you like either released him or like set him free or let him figure out who he was or something. One of those. But anyways, so you pick up the last piece and the world goes blurry, and you teleport to the big altar with all of the coffins around it again. You put the piece in, and then the whole wall rolls away in front of you, and revealing the final portion of the game.
Yep. And now we get to talk about all the different alternate endings.
Yeah. Let's talk about 4 endings now.
I believe there's effectively 2 endings, but yeah,
with world elements that you've interacted with. I think that's how I would perceive it.
So
there's a good ending and a bad ending and 2 variations for both, right?
Yeah, that's basically how I got it.
Bad too. I can run through them quickly, and then we can all talk about which ones we got.
Save the animals, kill the animals.
Yeah, pretty much.
So there's only really a binary choice that you have to make. after you open the portal, you go left or you go right. And down the left path, you can see some of the golden lines that have indicated puzzles and stuff. And down the right path, it's just kind of dark. You can't really see anything. If you choose the left path, you see this cinematic where the red man rises back to power. The civilization is built back up. Sorry, those are the images on the walls. And after that, you go through, there's another room with a puzzle. You complete the puzzle and it wakes up everybody in the enormous room in the coffins. All the coffins start lighting up.
And everybody gets up, and that cinematic is gorgeous. They all stand up, and like you can see like these beautiful silhouettes of the people, and then the doors open, and everybody goes outside. You see them re-irrigating the land, rebuilding, basically rebuilding their society in this world, which is really cool.
And so if you choose the right path, the main part that you get is that you see your character, you walk along the shore for a ways, and you eventually get to a shack with a boat in it, and you get in the boat and you start rowing off into the distance. You row for a while, and then it switches to a cutscene, and you see all the people in the coffins, and they're still there. They're contained. And it switches back and forth between that and the people for a while. And the lady just continues to sail off in the sunset, and it ends like that. Now, the variations on them are that in the game, there are these forges that you can close, which basically heals the ground around them. It's like it damages you, and if you close them, you have to close them before you die, basically. And if you close all the forges, you will get a segment that shows the forge closed at the end. And if you don't close all the forges, you'll get a segment that shows one of the forges still open and contaminating the ground.
I guess I closed them all then, because I only saw the closed forges.
It's important to note that on the left ending, the bad ending, you see the people around the forge like doing stuff with it, like you see in the wall paintings and stuff, that they apparently are still using it.
You consider the left ending the bad ending? That's
No,
the one.
I think he was.
I'm saying the bad ending version of the left ending.
I
so
see.
if you don't close all the forges.
Yeah, it's a grid.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I think the right ending, the right side, to be the less positive ending at the very least, the one where you just leave.
Maybe. I'm actually really unsure what to think about that final ending, and I feel like it's dependent on two things that aren't well established. The first one being, are the people actually dead? Are those coffins and people being resurrected? Or were they people who are trying to avoid the Black Death and so basically put themselves into stasis? And I want to think it's the latter, but they don't give a lot of evidence either way. And then the other choice is, you see when you wake them up, the person with the hourglass sort of takes the credit. They lead the charge. And one of the motifs I got from the story was that he was a bit conniving and sinister, in the sense that he kept taking the ideas from the Skull Man, that, like he took credit for the light thing. He took credit for the plant. And so the question was, is taking that path where you wake everyone up, is that basically not vindicating your brother's death? Is that sort of letting that go for naught? And I don't know. That it's kind of vague.
So you did mention there the idea of you having a brother in the game. I would like to kind of pick up on that just after. Concerning the endings, I think it's less a good and bad ending and more kind of an idea of maybe almost like, let's call it, the story, and then forgiveness and saying rebuild civilization or kind of move on to a new world kind of thing. I think it's less kind of a binary good or bad, but more kind of a, do you let people kind of start again, or do you personally start again?
Yeah. Just quickly, what path did everybody choose? Just path. I chose the left path.
I chose the left path first, but I assumed that the game was going to be like, no, you can't go back once you go one way. So I hit escape, scrolled down, saved, made a hard save, and then did the other one right away.
Yeah.
So which
Um,
one did you do first, though, Lewis?
I did the left one first.
Left.
I want to say I did left, but I basically just said I'm gonna see both, so I don't care which one I do first.
So it sounds like all of us chose left first, at least.
So I think my second playthrough I may have done it the other way around. I forget.
I know that I chose left because I was more interested. You can see down the hall the golden lines on the ground, and I was more interested in figuring out what all those meant. And I guess I didn't really get a concrete answer to that, but it did end up letting all the people get up, basically, or revive them. So I suppose that's fine. I was happy with the ending that I got.
Yeah. And I was really bad at saves coming, so I poorly timed my saves so it wouldn't work again. So I ended up doing left on the first playthrough and then right on the second. And I feel, yeah, I did get more out of it in that way. But
If I could make a feature request, to the developers, if somehow they end up watching this, it would be like chapter saving. Once you beat the game, you can load into any act.
Yeah. Or simply put the last autosave at that decision. Don't autosave after it.
Yeah. Or at least the puzzle before that. Or like maybe a warning. I don't know.
I do feel that if I can get into just general kind of talk about the game now, it's I do feel it's one of those kind of games that you make a decision and then kind of replay to almost see how you can change on that decision. Because I will admit, the first playthrough, I got the left bad ending because I didn't really interact with the actual forges. So that did get me thinking, well, maybe I should try and sort them out or do more with them and see what that outcome does.
I probably would have tried to get all the forges if achievements were working and I actually felt like I had an incentive to try to play the game more, try to 100%.
Yeah,
I think that's down the line. I think
Yeah.
It's unfortunate. I don't know. I all I know is that I bloody love this game.
It's a good game, yeah.
It's really nice to, on this show, play a game with a lot of story that we can just sit here and casually talk for an hour and 30 minutes about. To play a game that I think is both flawed and at the same time really, really good. Because those games are the most fun to talk about, I find. A game that has a lot of really good elements, but at the same time, maybe one or two things that make you kind of sour on it. I think that this game is gorgeous. I had a hell of a lot of fun with it.
I don't know about you guys, but I did feel like I warmed up to the bits I was sour about. So the inclusion of Birdman, apparently they've kind of been back and forth. Allegedly, they've been back and forth with versions of him without versions. Looking back on it, I'm kind of glad he's there because it really does add to the story.
So what do you mean versions without? Like he didn't have the mask, or
No, I think
Oh.
allegedly there was a version without the Birdman in places.
Oh, you mean without the monster that can kill you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, I see what you're saying. I thought you meant in the images. 'Cause I'm like, how do you remove that
right.
much from the game?
No, like have him in the imagery, but not have him in the world. I think the game is better off having the spook.
It's better off. And once you kind of get past the idea of this is spooky, this is scary, and then you go into it like that, I think it's so much better for it.
Yeah.
I agree. I was hesitant at first too because I'm like, I really am not a big fan of horror games, horror movies, that sort of thing. And I really I don't know that if I played a different horror game that my view would change, but this game in particular really made me tense, but in a good way and in a way that I wanted to try to overcome this terror that's kind of sitting over my shoulder.
Yeah.
And I mean, I would say that kind of my final recommendation for this game would be that, to like this game, you need to like, story-driven adventure. You need to like, strong puzzles, and you need to like horror. And you need to like, if you like those three things and go in understanding that those three things are present, then yes, you will absolutely love this game. But if there's even one of those things you don't like, it can end up miring the entire experience because all three are so ingrained into the game. My first playthrough was sort of mired by the horror aspect because, I wasn't expecting that jump scare, and the whole rest of the game was just way too tense for me because of that. In my second playthrough, the horror was not an issue, but at that point, the puzzles became either really easy because I already knew the solution, or monotonous because it was just working out all the different pieces. And so the puzzles ended up miring my second playthrough. So that first playthrough, you really need to be able to, appreciate all of it at once.
As a fan of spooky atmosphere and a fan of puzzle games, this game is not difficult at all. The hardest puzzle would be the shards, and we did talk about what finding all of them does, right, on this, or did we just do that on the pre-show?
We didn't.
It gives you 100%.
So there's a collectible there's shards of broken glass, and they can be used to fill in a stained glass window which is broken. And then once you do, it'll open and it'll allow you access to a vial which automatically replenishes itself, and it's blue. It gives off blue or white light instead of orange light.
Okay. So that was the only puzzle in the game that I would consider to be bullshit or hard, which is literally just a scour the map and look for tiny little shards of glass. Like, it's the needle in the haystack puzzle. And
some of them are hidden behind other puzzles. There was, one that I had found and solved, and there was another one where I didn't actually solve it. I still don't know how to solve it. I'm pretty sure it has something to do with the ability to set the time of day, but I never went back to figure it out.
That one, if it's the one I'm thinking of, you need the moon in the sky.
Yep, I think that was it.
The moon needs to be in the sky, and then you put the thing and you match it with. You literally just line the ball up with the moon, and it goes and floats up into the air, and then the moon goes from the moon goes bzzz, down into.
Well, the thing was, I figured that's what it was. I went to go try to find the thing where you set the time of day, and then I completely lost where I was trying to go. So
I
it
solved
just never
it by
happened.
mistake. It was nighttime when I found the puzzle. So
yeah.
But
anyways,
I think the puzzle design in this game is very easy. Just in general, like there are no puzzles in this game that I would describe as excruciatingly difficult. Coming from somebody who finished The Witness and somebody who beat Myst years ago, admittedly with some guides. By guide I mean my friend who beat it before me. But
and if you know me, I'm pretty much a walkthrough maniac. I'll use a walkthrough even if it's just a tiny bit difficult, and I never had to use a walkthrough for the entire game. So
I would have used a walkthrough for the shards, but when I played this game and finished it the first time, the game wasn't out yet, so there was nothing I could do. I finished all the puzzles, but I didn't finish the shards. That was the one puzzle I didn't finish. I found everything else and did everything else, but yeah. So. I really like the game, in short.
Yeah, my concluding thought, I'm going to kind of throw back to my little spiel at the beginning of the show about the different types of game theories. And so I talked about the object holistic theories, which tries to encompass the entire game and just reconcile everything with each other, basically. Yeah. And so this is what I came up with. So this game encourages players to supply their own lives, beliefs, and experiences to the game because of the design decision to have no dialogue or text. And I think that this game would have been vastly different if they had decided to have either of those things, dialogue or text. And I think that because of the lack of those, we were able to have very in-depth discussion, a lot of which we drew from our own lives. And I also quite enjoyed the game. Heartily recommend if you're interested in this type of game.
If I were to, I'll let Fog talk right after and give his final thoughts. But the only thing that really, when I describe this game as a game with flaws, I mean things like you climb the ladder and you launch into space. You climb another ladder and it launches you forward. Like, there are points in the game that feel janky, but at the same time, not even close to as janky as something like Empathy, which is another game that we covered on this show. So if you want to listen to us talk about a game that's genuinely broken and borderline unplayable, 2 episodes ago. Fog. Final thoughts.
My final thoughts do kind of revolve around the way that I did approach this game. So I don't know whether I'd recommend starting a non-story version of this game where I just completely went gung ho for the end goal. But because of that, I have got an experience from that first one, which has kind of led me into do a lore-based one of those. And there's still so much more for me to achieve and kind of get around in the game. I really want to do glass shards once achievements are sorted. But it's a gorgeous game to look at. The puzzles, whilst a little bit easier, I really like them. They're really nice in the way that they kind of work with the environments. There's a nice variety. And the story and the spooks, I think, were totally worth it in the end. Really fun experience.
Awesome. Also, it's been fun talking about it.
Yeah, definitely.
I think we're pretty much done here. Does anybody have anything they want to mention before we wrap up? Because we are at an hour 36, which is one of our longer episodes. Nope. Silence.
I mean, I feel like I should clarify that, I talked about how I didn't really like the horror aspect, but I would say in the end, I don't think it really ruined it. Like, I didn't think it was one of my favorite games of all time, but I wouldn't go so far to say it's a bad game because of it.
No, I would describe this game as a flawed gem.
Yeah, I can see that.
Very pretty one.
It's worth your time. Pick it up.
Totally. To anybody watching, this is the portion of the show where I'm going to allow Fog, our guest host, and then my co-hosts to shout out anything that they're currently doing on the interwebs or anything they want to mention real quick. And then after that, we're going to go into After Hours, which isn't going to be super long today, maybe about 10-15 minutes. We're just going to sit in IRL for a little bit and talk with the chat. That portion of the show will not be recorded in the audio version, so if you're listening to the audio version, I'm sorry, you're out of luck. If you're watching this in video, you're also out of luck. But if you're watching live, stick around because we're gonna be here for a little bit, just a little bit though. So Fog, is there anything you would like to talk about, shout out, or mention before we wrap up?
Just future projects really, as far as what I'm up to. I see a cat. I think people will probably be enjoying. It's a cute cat. I'm getting distracted. So I'm getting back into Twitch. I'm doing construction management games in a similar kind of way to Blind, but well, I'll see what I can do about doing my own kind of thing. We do have a collaboration going at the moment that we'll get done in due time. But I tweet. I'm also getting better at making YouTube videos. Fog_Twitch on Twitch. Fog_Twitch on Twitter for some reason, and Foggy on YouTube. But gents, it's been absolutely wonderful to be on. Thank you very much for making me play this game, and thank you very much for having me.
Cheers. And to my frequent hosts who are always here, Lewis, Thyeggman, anything you guys want to say, or just cheers?
Do you want to go first, Eggman?
My cat is very hungry and he's bothering me, but he's also adorable. So I don't really have anything a lot. I hope you guys tuned in for the streams over at during PAX that Blind and I did. I'm glad that I could incorporate at least some of the stuff that I learned into today's podcast. But yeah.
Fun.
I guess if I got to shout out something, I'll shout out the same thing I shout out every time, twitch.tv/LRFLEW. I will hopefully actually start streaming soon. I know I say that every single time, but I think this time I may actually mean it. We'll see.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah. And, hopefully the PC market's actually good enough for me to start buying parts soon.
Hopefully. And if you enjoyed the show, you can find all the previous episodes. We've done all 20 of them. Admittedly, the first 8 are a little bit jank. It took us a little bit to figure out what we were doing, but they're all worth listening to for their own reasons. If you wish to watch those are all up on my YouTube channel, which is all available beneath the stream and all in the description of this. And if you want to listen to the audio version, we do have a SoundCloud as well. The RSS feed is public if you want to add it to your podcast app of choice. It is on Google Play already, but I just go with public RSS feeds because we keep getting rejected from iTunes, and I've kind of given up. So, and I don't like having iTunes installed on my computer, so maybe that's why we keep getting rejected. Anyways, If you want to watch more of my streams, I stream here a lot. I play a lot of simulation and management games. It's been fun. We're going to end this show now. So thank you very much to everybody who tuned into Story Mode, and we'll be back in a moment for After Hours. Thank you very much for watching.
Bye.
Bye.
I'm waving too.
That's exactly what you just said.